Corsets, an undergarment that has been worn for centuries and has become quite a bit controversial in modern times for many reasons. Well, mostly because of historical dramas, but that's not the topic of today's video. Today, we'll take a closer look at an argument that has existed in the historical costuming community for a long time, which is the difference between corsets and stays. Are they separate garments or are they in fact the same? But let's start from the beginning. In case you're not really familiar with the topic, I'm gonna quickly summarize it for you. In recent years, as the topic of corsets became even more popular in media, the historical costuming community, aside from defending the usage of corsets, started to draw more emphasis on the differences between corsets and stays. Stays being the garment worn around 17th and 18th century, and corsets being the garments worn from that point onwards. They are both undergarments made to support the torso and shape it to the fashionable silhouette. They differ a bit in shape and stiffening used, which along with the different terms being used for the garments is the reason why the majority of the historical costuming community, at least the English-speaking one, considers the garments to be two separate things. It's not uncommon to hear a costumer talk about this in a stays-related video, but if you want more information on this side of the topic, Abby Cox has a video all about it. You saw the title. You know I have the opposite opinion, but to be honest, the majority of my time in this community, I have thought the same thing. I mean, what are you supposed to think when all the knowledgeable people in the community are telling you this is the case? Of course you believe them. You don't even have enough knowledge to really question anything. Well, about a year ago, when I was making a collab video with Green Martha and a bunch of other creators, focusing specifically on sewing terms used in different languages, they all sort of came back to me. You see, the biggest argument for corsets and stays being separate garments is terminology. Terminology means language. My language doesn't have separate terms for those two garments. So what does this all mean? Now, this is the time to grab some popcorn or beverage of choice, as this may get a little bit spicy. It's not a secret that the historical costuming community tends to be rather ignorant at times. I mean, aside from all the obvious discrimination that unfortunately happens everywhere and has a tendency to come up even more often, especially when history is involved, there is also a behavior that is a bit less eye-catching, which is the strong lean towards European and white American fashion. The reason why I put European in quotation marks honestly deserves its own video, but for the usage of this topic, let's just say that this meaning of European focuses mostly on Western Europe. Knowing that, let's look at the languages used. The far majority of this conversation is happening in English with some bits of French. There are two important reasons why those languages are used the most. The first reason is that English happens to be a global language. There are a lot of native English speakers, and even those who use it as a second language often choose to talk about historical costuming in English, as most of the research is done in that language. The second reason is that England and France happen to be countries that had a big influence on European fashion. Part of that is that they were empires, but let's not get into all of this right now. Don't get me wrong. Using English is not a bad thing in itself, but unfortunately it leads to a bad thing in this case, which is generalization. You see, if you speak only one language on an everyday basis, you rarely think about what something may be called in different parts of the world. In this case, English-speaking costumers are basing their opinions on languages they find most relevant in this conversation. The languages of empires. And even though at the first glance it might make sense as they are using European languages to speak about European fashion, the moment you take a deeper look into this, the narrative starts to fall apart. So let's do just that. I would say it's general practice, or at least it should be general practice, to do research on certain things in the language that they would be talked about by the people involved in them. For example, if you want to research, let's say, Turkish fashion, you should start with the sources provided by Turkish experts. And if you don't know the language, use a translator or look for sources in English provided by the same people. Corsets and stays are a part of fashions worn predominantly in Europe, and pretty much every time they left Europe, it was because colonial empires brought them with them to occupied territories. This means that when doing research on those garments, you should use sources from all over Europe, not just to Western European countries that you find most relevant. I mean, there are a lot of people of different cultures in Europe. Languages range from just 24 official languages to even 225 languages native to Europe. 2 out of 225 is not looking too good. Even 2 out of 24 is a pretty bad score, especially considering that the languages used are pretty clearly based on Western supremacy, and they don't even reflect the language families in Europe. In my case, Polish happened to be my native tongue, and we use only one word, not only for stays and corsets, but also for a pair of bodies, and even folk vests, which is gorset. Poland not only happened to be a Central/Eastern European country, but our language is also a part of a different language group than English or French, which are the Slavic languages. And I can tell you, Slavic people are a big group in Europe, and our languages are rather similar, which means having just one term for those garments might be the case in most of those languages, if not all of them. So, knowing that something in this argument doesn't make sense, I decided to do some research into other languages. Unfortunately, it is rather difficult to research specific terminology in languages one does not know. But we live in the times where global communication is pretty easy, and who would know their terminology best if not native speakers? So I asked for some help in groups related to historical costuming across platforms like Facebook and Reddit, as well as my Instagram. And I got some pretty interesting results. Now, just to be clear, even though I got a lot of answers from people of different nationalities, the sample is still pretty small, so not everything might be 100% accurate. Also, I worked under the assumption that people in those circles are already pretty knowledgeable on the topic and know the right terminology. So, knowing all of that, let's take a look at the responses. I'm going to start with the more popular opinion. We already know that English and French differentiate between the two garments. Not gonna lie, I thought it was really obvious that in English the garments are called corsets and stays, but not one, but two people decided it's necessary to let me know that in the comment under my post, written in English. And yes, both terms were used in my post, so thanks for proving my point even further, I guess. On a slightly more interesting note, in French, corset is called corset, which, I mean, it's pretty obvious the term is of French origin, so. And stays are called this word. I would pronounce it corpsplain, but I know this is wrong, and I have no idea how to pronounce it, so I'm sorry. I am going to write down every word because There are too many languages in the script that I have no idea how to phonetically pronounce all the words. I'm gonna try a few, but I'm just physically not able to pronounce all of them and memorize it. Sorry. Entertainment, am I right? I'm just going to try my best. Germany also is in this category. The words they use are corset, spelled this way, for corsets, and stays are called what I would pronounce a Schnurrbrust, but I know it's wrong. Again, sorry. Which roughly translates to tie waist. The next one is Swedish. In this language, corset translates to corset, just like in German, and stays transfer to what my best guess would be lipstick. There is only one more language in this category, at least from the answers I got, and I don't have an answer from a comment on this, but there's a spreadsheet from the collab video we did with Green Marfa. So if you don't believe me, watch this video. So the words are corset for corset and hubon for stays. And I think I got this one right because I did take Spanish classes, so that would be embarrassing if I already forgot Spanish, which also might be the case, but that I should know. Before we move on to languages that use only one term for both garments, a quick shout out to Dutch people. Somehow you guys gave me the biggest amount of answers, and somehow none of them really match each other. So I'm going to mark Netherlands as grey, as in I got answers, but I have no idea where to put you guys in. I honestly don't know how you accomplished that, but congratulations to you. In the comments you may try to decide where you guys are, because you confuse me apparently. Maybe you confused each other, I don't know. For the ones I got a more coherent answer to. Let's start with Polish, as it's the language I am 100% sure of, and it started this whole rabbit hole in the first place. We use only one word for both corset stays and folk vests, which is gorset. Fun fact, until the end of the 17th century, the word corset was used, which was just a way to spell the French word to match the Polish pronunciation of the letters. Later on, the word got merged with the word gors, which means bosom or chest, sometimes torso, and the letter K was replaced by the letter G. Also, if you are curious how we differentiate between different silhouettes, we just clarified the period we are talking about. In Slovak, both garments are referred to as corset or corset, whichever pronunciation is right, or maybe none of them are right, I don't know. But there also exists an older term, which is životík. Fun fact, apparently this word, I don't know if I pronounce it right, apparently this word is so hard, it's like really hard to pronounce, that even the person that wrote the answer told me not to even try because I will fail. And I speak a very similar language, so I will trust them. So this word, aside from meaning corset and stays, also means a folk vests or a tight-fitted bodice. In Russian, the word corset is used. This is the way to spell it in Cyrillic, this is the way to spell it in Latin letters. That one I am sure of how to pronounce because I have taken Russian classes in middle school and I still remember. So, point for me, I guess. Those are the answers I got from other Slavic people, but knowing our languages, I think it's pretty safe to assume that The rest also use one term for both garments, which is why I am going to mark those languages with a lighter green to indicate that probably one term, not 100% sure of. So there's that. Staying in Eastern Europe, in Hungarian both stays and corsets are called what I would assume is fuso. You can check out the right pronunciation in Marian's video, by the way. I also got an answer for Romanian, but unfortunately Instagram cut the message, so from context, I'm assuming that the end of this message is we probably don't, and the word for both is corset. But this has a higher likeliness to be incorrect, so I'm just pointing that out in case it's wrong. Moving on to the Western languages. In Irish, both garments are called this word. My take on it is corset. Is it right? I don't know. Google it. Danish uses corset and snorleaf for both corsets and stays. In Portuguese, the word espartilho is used. I think the H is also silent in Portuguese, like in Spanish. Not sure though. Norwegian is a pretty interesting one. We have both the word corset and snorleaf, I think, used in different periods. But the encyclopedia recognizes that the fact that a different word started being used at some point doesn't make the garments different things. So according to that, they are still the same garment, which is why Norwegian landed in this category. Moving to the edges of what is considered Europe, we have Turkish and the word corset. So this is all for European languages, which are the ones I am going to take a closer look on for today. But those are not all the answers. So, fun fact, in Japanese the word corset is used for both, and in Arabic both the word corset and mashar are used. Now you have pretty much all the information I used in my research, but this little colored map isn't necessarily the best way to portray what all of this means, so let me throw in some numbers. Based on just the answers, we have 5 languages for group separate and 10 languages for group the same. If we add all the Slavic languages, it would be 19 languages for group the same, and there wouldn't even be enough official languages left to even that out on the other side. Also, in the team separate, we have just 2 language groups, and in the team the same, we have 5. There are 7 European countries that speak languages from team separate, and 10 from team the same. 21 if we add the rest of the Slavic countries. Counting the population of all these countries isn't even necessary, as Russia and Turkey have the biggest populations from all of European countries, and they are both in the team the same. Also, countries speaking the languages from team the same are more geographically spread out than the ones from the group separate. Welcome to the second day of this recording. Let's continue. I think based on all of this information, it's fair to say that most of the European population considered corsets and stays to be the same garment, at best evolutions of the same garment. So why does the historical costuming community think otherwise? Well, the answer is pretty simple. Anglocentrism. Just in case you don't know what that is, here is what the Cambridge Dictionary defines the term as. The fact of seeing things from the point of view of England or English people, the idea that England or English people are the most important. Or the fact of considering the English language or English-speaking culture to be most important, or of expecting everything to be in English. I honestly don't think I need to explain this one that much further. Anglocentrism is something very prevalent in the modern world. It's the reason why English-speaking media has a better chance for some kind of recognition. It's the reason why so many people around the world have to learn English to pursue a well-paying career. I mean, it's even the reason why some Karen might demand that you speak English. To be honest, at the end of the day, it's probably also the reason why I'm talking to you in English right now and not my native language. Now, all of this is also connected to colonization and imperialism, but Anglocentrism is a huge part of this. Well, at least if we focus on the British colonization, of course. Also, I think it's important to point out that some people may call this Eurocentrism. One comment I would like to make about that is the word Eurocentrism is very biased towards the Western world and Western Europe. In fact, the word Eurocentrism doesn't even have to include Eastern Europe, which connects to us being left out from being European throughout history, and how the Western world often thinks of itself as better than even us, other Europeans, which for some people that aren't really familiar with European history may sound really ridiculous. But sadly, it's weirdly true. Because of all of that, this word often masks how Eastern Europeans are treated and have been treated in the West. Also, it minimizes things like genocide that has been happening throughout the Cold War, and not only then, and sadly, as I think many people have observed, things don't really are considered important if they are not European, which sadly has been apparent throughout history and is still very relevant to this day. So, a light suggestion: if you don't know if something actually connects to the entirety of Europe, it may be better to use words like Anglocentrism and Western centrism. This is an idea I will be coming back to in my future videos, and I do plan on speaking more about Eastern European history and its connection to how we perceive the world in the present day. So, if you would be interested in more of my weirdly specific research, click that subscribe button and the notification bell. In the long run, it will enable me to keep spending my time on actually well thought out, fully scripted videos like this one. Now, to clarify something, I don't actually think that using the term corsets and stays to differentiate between different shapes and periods is a bad thing. On the contrary, this is exactly why people come up with new terminology. It helps to differentiate and define different things. If you are talking to another person that knows this terminology, it makes it so much easier to communicate, and I mean, this is why we have language in the first place. I just think that it's rather pretentious and ignorant to be mad at someone for not knowing this terminology. Calling those things different terms isn't as common as you might think, so maybe chill out a little bit. Having said that, for the people that haven't really grasped the message behind this video yet, this video isn't really about corsets. I mean, all the things I said still stand. The thing is, this is just one situation where you can observe this kind of behavior. And it's always easier to demonstrate something on a specific example. Plus, making this about corsets means that people are actually more likely to watch this video. Unfortunately, if I titled this video something like Anglocentrism in the historical costuming community, no one would really watch this video and the video wouldn't have a chance to be picked up by the algorithm. As silly as this may seem, this kind of gatekeeping happens rather frequently in the historical costuming community, and it can be rather harmful to people. Remember that Abby Cox video I mentioned in the beginning? Well, this is a comment that I made under this video at the time when it came out. Not a very good thing to say, especially about your own language. But hey, I didn't even realize it when I was writing this comment. Why? Because everybody around me told me that this is how I am supposed to think about this. A community making you feel somehow ashamed or embarrassed about your own culture is probably pretty toxic in one way or another. This kind of behavior prevents the community from being actually culturally diverse, because it shows that the community doesn't care about how different cultures may perceive certain topics. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people of different backgrounds in the costume community, though most of them are Western. The thing that I noticed though is that the moment you spend more time in this community, you are somehow expected to do what everybody else is doing. This community is heavily based in Western fashion and a Western way of thinking, and unfortunately I found that it's not really open for change. So to the people that desperately want more representation in this community, maybe it would be a good idea to actually start working on those kind of behaviors to make this place actually more welcoming to people of different backgrounds, instead of constantly complaining that people don't want to join because they feel unsafe in this kind of environment. Just a suggestion. I mean, hey, I no longer feel comfortable in this community just because I am Eastern European and not really a girly person. I imagine the farther you are from Western or English-speaking culture, the more out of place you may feel in this community. So I guess to summarize all of this, from time to time reflect on how you formed some of your opinions. You may find that you formed them on a very biased narrative. All that means is that you have to rethink some things. The world won't crumble just because you were wrong about something and didn't realize it. I hope you enjoyed this video, or at least found it interesting, because I know it got pretty heavy, especially on the end there. I have honestly been working on this video on and off for months because I wanted to make sure that it will carry the message that I wanted it to. I have already recorded this video 2 or 3 times a couple months ago without a script, but found that those kind of videos need a full script to match the quality of the videos I want to have on this channel. And trust me, writing an over 3,000 word script, almost 4,000, plus all the research takes a lot of time, and unfortunately I don't have enough following to earn any money from YouTube. That being said, every subscription and like bring me closer to actually being able to justify spending all this time on this weird hobby of mine, and by proxy producing more content for you guys. If you really like what I do here and have a little bit of spare money, I do have a Ko-fi you can donate to, but as everything else, this is completely optional and I won't pressure anyone to give me money, because that's kinda weird. I hope you have a great rest of the day and get a little bit of a break after this rather heavy video. And I'll see you next time I overthink something to the point of actually making a video about it. Więc do zobaczenia następnym razem. Bye!